Simulation and Seneferu's procedural pipeline. Configuring the simulation correlations together in the system and in the database could be a little bit confusing if you are not familiar with how Seneferu workflow is and how the assets are parented and linked to each other. So I will try to make this clear now as much as possible. So what happens is that the downstream process or the next process overrides the previous process if the previous process was one of the dependencies or was mentioned inside the next process. So, for example, if you have a hair compound sim that is depending on the clothes simulation. So when you do simulation for the shot, if the simulation task of the shot found that there is simulation for the hair, he will use it. If didn't find it, then he will simulate hair, but he will use the clothes simulation that he found. If he didn't find clothes simulation and didn't find hair simulation, then the shot simulation will simulate both the clothes and the hair inside the context of the shot simulation. So that's how it works. The highest simulation order or any other process order is always looking back to the previous processes. If it found the previous one, it's using it. If didn't, then it's creating it or using the previous one of it, and so on. So that's how we build and correlate things. So let's take an example here of one shot that we can create. For example, on this shot, let's create a simulation task. This is now a shot level simulation task. You saw before how did we make standalone simulations where each character, for example, have his own hair and clothes simulation. But now we can test how this. I didn't assign it to myself. I will have to do that. And I'm forcing it to be ready. Of course, the production manager will not make this ready before he knows that all the dependencies are ready for the job to run, but I'm just forcing this manually now. Notice that the production manager have detected that this character already have a hair compound simulation task. Accordingly, the simulation task will use this task instead of redoing the simulation of this task, assuming that you have other assets that will be simulated together. So let's now delete some close simulation tasks so we can see what is going to happen in that case. So here we will delete these two simulation tasks. And we will also delete, I will delete only the close simulation. Or let's delete only this, only the hair simulation. And the next one I will delete let's say the hair, which let's delete the clothes. We deleted the hair on the previous one. So in this case, we are telling the system that this can be running standalone, so we will run it standalone and we will have somebody to do it, and this can be done in standalone also. It doesn't need any other, it's not affecting and not getting affected by other simulations. So anything that is simulated that needs these things to affect the simulation there in the higher level simulation task, then it will be there for you in the dependencies, so you can utilize it and you can configure your connections to them. So now when I refresh the dependencies of this short level simulation task, you will find that we have the closed simulation that is already here, and you will find that we have Pauline hair compound setup, which means that when we load the dependencies, the hair compound setup here will have the animation of the same character will be ingested automatically by the production manager into the loaded hair compound setup, and accordingly this will simulate out the hair of this character because it didn't have hair simulation here, and we requested a high level simulation. So let's just load all these dependencies and see what is going to happen. Of course, most of these assets doesn't have something inside, but just let's load whatever is available. As you can see now, the hair compound setup was loaded. If you read here, unfortunately the errors is hiding them. You can go up here, you will notice that, for example, retargeted Pauline rig by animation, which is what I was explaining. So when you come here, you will find that this rig is actually now animation version 1. You will notice that the close is its close setup, but if we have simulation, then this simulation was going to be ingested here instead. You will notice also that if the production manager didn't find anywhere to ingest or retarget the animation that is needed, it will be loaded in the scene, which means that these now can affect the clothes of this character when you do the simulation, or not the clothes actually, because we kept the clothes here. So if we remove the clothes of this character here, and let's actually remove let's keep only the animations. So the dependencies now are, so let's make a new scene and let's see the dependencies again. You will notice now that the animations are there of the horse, but because there is no simulation setups or any, because there is no closed setups are available for this character, so no simulation setups or simulations are available. Then he found the animation of this character here. He brought in the hair compound setup, which will be used to simulate the hair, and this will be used to simulate the clothes, and this for this character, same thing, and this is the hair setup actually for the horse, because it have hair setup, then it will be the animation will be ingested to here. This is actually interesting because Unfortunately, I don't have anything inside this asset here, so it will not be loaded. But one of the things that it's important to know that in this case, when there are two horses available and it's only one setup, what the production manager will do, he will load this setup 3 times and will ingest or will retarget the rig inside the 3 setups, one for each asset. As a result, you will be having 3 different simulations for the hair horse, one for every instance of the asset. All what I'm saying is going to happen automatically. After that, all what you will have to do is just to create the asset locator and click on publish, and the task control will take care of every thing as I'm just explaining. So let's load the dependencies now and see what is going to happen. And notice that when the production manager, he will not find anything inside the horsehair setup, then he will just load the animation and will ignore the empty process or the empty task. And as I mentioned before, if we already have published a hair setup for this horse, then it will be loaded 3 times, and the 3 animations will be retargeting the rig in each one of them. So let's see what we have now. As I said about the horse, these are the 3 animation of the horse. It didn't target anything because there is nothing to be targeted, because the closed setup, the hair setup, as I said, is empty. And you will notice that this is now the closed setup of this guy. It brought the approved version. And if you query the version of this, you will find that this is not actually the animation, but not the rig, but it's actually the animation of this character for this shot. The same is, that's it. And this, of course, will simulate the clothes of this character for this shot. And if you go to this lady here, you will find the same. This is animation version 1. And if you go here, you will find that this was actually supposed to be, this is also animation version 1, and this is supposed to be the close simulation of this character. Here is the point. The hair compound setup relies on the simulated clothes, and the simulated clothes is not happened yet. So to do the 2 together, what you have to do now is to replace this setup with the result of this setup, which means that you want to simulate the clothes and the hair together, yes? So you need to replace this asset with this asset, because this asset is going to simulate the clothes, because this is the clothes setup. This is what will simulate the clothes of the character. And this is just a reference to the simulated clothes. Instead of that, I want to replace this object by this object that this guy here is going to output, which is the object here. So all what you need to do now is to select this and click on replace. Then now all this setup, the hair setup, is relying now on this dress rather than this one. And this one will be simulated using this one. So that's how all the simulations are going to run together. So now all what you need to do after configuring the collisions, and maybe you want this dress also to the ground to be collider for this dress, and maybe you want the horse to be collider for the man clothes and the lady dress, in case if they are going, for example, to take one of these horses. And when you finish configuring all the collision rules and the dynamic rules you want, you will click on Asset Locator. Now everything is under the locator, and now when you publish this simulation, then all the simulation will run, and all the caches will be published in one context. This time it's called the simulation. So all the simulations will go in one container, having all the clothes of the two characters, the hair of the horses, if there is hair set up for them here, the hair of the two characters. Everything will go in this context. That will be loaded automatically in the dependencies of the shot assembly or lighting or whatever is asking for the simulation of the shot. Let's work on an actual shot simulation task now, this time, and let's load dependencies. Notice that here I deleted all the simulation tasks from the characters. I kept only the setups, so everything for the two characters in this shot will be simulated together. So the hair and cloth for both the two characters and are going to be simulated together in one pass within this context. If you check now what do we have, you will notice that the production manager have loaded all the setups and automatically targeted all the rigs with the animation. This is animation. If you go to this, you will find that this rig is actually animation and everything. There is only one thing here, as we mentioned before, that the hair compound setup or the hair simulation for this lady requires to interact with the simulation of the clothes. In that case, this is not the clothes what we are interested about, because this is a static cache of the clothes. Our clothes that will be simulated is actually this one, which is the actual Maya scene that has the setup for the closed simulation. So what we want to do is to replace the connection of this with this, or replace this dress with this dress, because this is the one that will be simulated, not this one. So we want the hair to collide with this dress. What we are going to do, we want to select this and replace. But this is going to fail because the two objects have to be in the same hierarchy order. To do that, as a workaround, I will put this asset in group, because as you notice, the assets are references. You cannot change that, and you should never switch them to import. What you have to follow the method that the production manager used to load the assets. So I will select this and will select this, and I will click on replace. This has replaced the connection of this asset, has copied all of them to the other one, from this object to the other object, which is this. Now the hair simulation will respect the motion of this asset. we can just take this out again, and let's select everything and create asset locator. Now all what we have to do is to click on publish. I will not take snapshot for this view, and I will say batch publish. Now the cloth for the two characters and the hair for the two characters will be simulated in one pass and will be published to this simulation task. Okay, now it's sent to the farm. So this is now the simulation running on the farm. Let's build even more complex example. This time I will take one of the shots that we already have, so we can have some caches and some pre-published assets that we can use. Let's go for scene 3. Let's, for example, say that we want a scene level effects. Could be anything, could be like dusts, could be whatever. You can give it any subcontext name here. Maybe you will have multiple. Let's say that this is dust. And let's say that we have this one will not refresh automatically actually unless you refresh it, but let's create another task here. Also effects, let's say crowd simulation and effects. This time I will call the second effect volumes, or let's say fallen leaves. Anything, whatever. Then so we have two effects, we have crowd simulation. Then let's assign all these things to me and say that all are ready to start. The production manager is sending me notes about the new tasks assigned to me. And let's add some additional shot related or shot level effects tasks. Like, for example, let's say that in this shot we want to have effects. And also I will assign it to myself. And we'll set it to ready to start first and assign it to myself. And let's also create a simulation task. So let's go now and see the shot level effects task. see what the production manager did is that he found all these, he took the simulation as dependency for this and the cloth compound simulation, the hair compound simulation that we have, the cloth simulation, we have the animation, and every thing will be as dependency for the effects. And notice here that effects SCN and effects SCN, the two effects tasks that we created on the scene level are also coming as input for the effects. This way, you can create an effect for the whole scene and refine it on per shot basis by creating an effects task on the shot itself. Then the effect will be, this will be loaded as if there is Maya scene or effects was published to this. This will load the Maya scene or the Houdini scene of these effects. If you are going to work in Houdini, then this will be loaded so you can refine it and publish the refined version that you made specifically for the shot. Then let's now see what we get. Before I proceed with a lot of complex correlations like this, I just want to make it clear that you shouldn't confuse yourself about what's happening here, because at the end, you should tell, it's a human readable thing. You should tell what you want. You want effects in the shot, just create effects in the shot. You want effect on a particular asset in the shot, go to the assets in the shot and create the task related to that, and so on. You want to simulate clothes for a character, create a clothes sim task for this particular character inside the shot. This clothes simulation will be affected by another character, then create the simulation in the shot itself so you can have access to the children of this shot, including that character. If you will have multiple tasks, create a name for each task. For example, as we said before, FX dust, FX volumes, FX fog, FX whatever. Clothes sim foreground character like this, for example, animation SHFG. For foreground characters, maybe there is animation SHBG, which will have 7 background characters for another animator who's going to do them. Anyway, the breakdown inside the project engine interface is beyond the scope of this session, but just to make it clear for you. Now, let's look at the tasks that we did. Let's start by the more children tasks like the FX SCN dust. You will notice that this scene level process is having access to everything found in all the shots. So all the simulations from all the shots will be accessible here. The reason why we do this on the scene level tasks are that most probably you are building a setup for the whole scene where you need to consider everything in the shot. You don't have to use everything, but you will have access to everything, so you can make a setup that can work for almost all the shots. Then, when you start working on per shot basis effects, you will have access to the setup that you built on the scene level. Accordingly, you can create a scene template, then you can refine it on per shot basis. You can create, for example, a katana lighting recipe for the whole scene, and you refine the shots in the lighting, in the shot lighting in a child on per shot basis. You can create a new comp, and you can refine the composition. You can new comp template, I mean, on the scene level, and you can refine this comp on per shot basis. Accordingly, the comp of the shot will be here, for example, and in the dependencies you will have the comp template where it will be loaded. Then it will give you access to just switch the shot code. Then all the composition will work as expected. Then you can add some tweaks. The same thing here for the effects. You can, when you do load dependencies, then you will get the scene level effects setups. Then you can refine it based on this shot if it does really need refinements. Maybe these setups can be just loaded as dependencies for the shot and published immediately, which is something that could happen in most of the cases, by the way, because when you build the scene level process or scene level task, you are, as I mentioned before, you will consider and you will have access to all the shot, all the assets on all the shots. Anyway, let me now load dependencies blindly for everything that we have and is connected or related to this effect. You will notice now that if I go here, you will notice that we have the cache loaded, all the caches loaded, and actually I stopped the video and modified something in the processes control table that the effects was not configured to be dynamic, so it didn't set the frame range of the shot. I just came here and I said that these two processes are dynamic and requires pre-roll, which means that these will require pre-roll to relax the caches or the simulation. Anyway, so now when these are loaded, this is loading the approved version of all the shot components. Now, what if, let's say first that in this effects task, we are going to create something like maybe dust foot hits and creating dusts when they are jumping, maybe some whatever the effects are. But let's say that the effects that you are going to do is going to affect the hair simulation or the close simulation of the two characters. So what is loaded now is the previously done simulation. In case if the effects you are going to do is going to affect the simulation, then in that case, as we mentioned in, previously, then you need to delete the closed or the hair simulation tasks. Accordingly, this will load the setups instead. It will load, for example, the hair compound setup instead of the simulation, and the animation of the character, which is here, will be automatically ingested or by the production manager on the hair compound setup in that case, rather than the sim. I don't want to mess with what we have, but let me try to do something and undo it. I will delete the hair compound sim for one of the characters. Sorry, not this. I want to expand this. And I will delete this. Make sure if you are doing something similar, don't delete the snapshot. Deleting the snapshot means deleting the files. Okay, now I will make a new scene better than. And now let's refresh the dependencies. Now you will notice now that there is no hair compound sim anymore, but there is hair compound setup, which means that we are going to simulate the hair based on the hair compound setup and the character animation here. By the way, all the conditions and rules I'm explaining now are actually unlimited, because nothing is hard-coded and nothing is configured directly. It's all rules are taught to the system or taught to this Seneferu production manager, and he thinks about it and comes with this based on the methods and keywords that we taught to the brain of Seneferu production manager. The brain is driving both the production manager and the engine of the project template in Tactic. So now when we load dependencies, we'll notice that all the available caches will be loaded just normally, as we saw for the simulation process. Except for the hair compound. Same as you see, this is not the simulated hair. Instead, this is having the close sim, and it's having the animation FG, so this is not static, and it will be simulated during the caching and publishing of the effects. So now let's assume that you are going to make some effects and whatever, and these effects are going to affect the hair of this character. Then this affected hair will be simulated and cached out during the publish and caching of this process. And of course, this is all the simulation processes are configured to be supported on the farm. So when you do batch publish, all the simulation will go and happen on the farm instead of on your local disk. Now let's try the same thing in Houdini. Switch the application to Houdini and set the task to in progress. Set the task to current. Sorry, this will connect the production manager to Houdini's task control, and as usual, you will set the task to in progress and load dependencies. The great thing about Nothing Real Seneferu that everything is working in the same way, the same logic. It's the same brain driving the production manager and the task control, and everything works according to that. So when I do load dependencies now, the same exactly what happened in Maya is happening in Houdini or in Katana or in any other application. So the production manager set the time range depending on the shot, based on the edit or based on the anim layout or whatever, and the dependencies are loaded, and now you can start working on the effects. And when you finish, all what you need to do is, as what we do in Maya, you will click on Publish Asset, which will write out the caches and files depending on what was configured for the process in the processes control table. In this case, it should be writing Houdini and VDB for most of the effects, depending on how did you configure the I/O for the process you are working on. And for your information, anything that isn't supported in Seneferu directly by automation, you can just simply do the cache, for example, as RIB archives or VDB, and drag and drop that to the task. This, in case if you want to write anything that the currently available Houdini I/O module for Seneferu doesn't write. If you are going to write anything that is not supported, I mean, just write it out, cache it out as you want, then drag it and drop it to the task. This will publish it and will give it the proper naming convention and will give it the proper version, and Seneferu Production Manager will manage that asset and its versions and variants and everything, because everything that the production manager is doing, as I mentioned before, is something that is not hard-coded or something conditions that is written inside the tool, but it's an educated methods to deal with the assets and versions and the files and the file types. Even if the production manager or Seneferu doesn't know about them, then he knows how to deal with them based on how did you tell him about the description of these things and the relations between them, each others, which is what you teach the production manager through the processes control table and the brain dependency graph.